being in workplaces, it wasn't a great environment. And I think it was like payday or Friday or something, I'd go on Oxford Street and spend so much money. Like that was the routine because I wasn't happy at work. So usually when you're impulse spending and you're trying to switch off your brain and just feel good immediately, it's because you're trying to deal with something with that quick fix.
Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of the Mr MoneyJar show. Today's guest is qualified accountant and neurodiversity specialist Krystle McGilvery. Krystle has been a fount of knowledge in my own life, and I'm really excited to get her on today's episode. We talk about the link between behavior and money and the things that she's done in her life and that we can all do to help us make more sound financial decisions. Anyway, it's time to get into the episode. So I look forward to you listening to it. You're tuned into the Mr MoneyJar show, and it's showtime. Krystle McGilvery, welcome.
Thank you so much. I was like, thank you.
Yeah, it can be a bit, when people do like the whole, like the introduction just goes on and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to live up to this thing that's been said about me. But thank you so much for coming on. Like we both know, you over the past few years have been a really kind of sound source of advice to me, both directly but also from afar, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, just let us know who you are and give us a flavor of what you do.
Okay, and I should have thought about this before, like, Chris, you're going on a podcast, be ready to speak about you. Okay, so as you said, my area is finance, behavior, and chartered accountant background wise. So I did that for over 15 years, working in private organizations, heading up the finance department. I like to specify I wasn't really the compliance kind of reporting side. I was more, hey, let's make some more money.
All right.
That was a bit more exciting. I think you did something similar, like internal, like reporting kind of stuff. And yeah, I did that for a while, then quit to really dive into personal finance and support individuals. And slowly but surely, I started to see the importance of psychology in financial decision-making. So I went on and did a master's in the psychology of decision-making.
I did not know that.
Did you not?
No.
What?
No, but I hope I continue to learn more new things about you.
I'm going to share the picture of me all gowned up. Yeah, because...
Do you know what? You graduated like recently, right?
I did, T.
Yeah.
I'm not offended.
I remember the post.
You do, yeah?
I remember the post.
But you didn't read it. You was like, oh, nice picture.
I probably read it at the time as well. I don't know whether that happened.
So yeah, like I decided to go into personal finance, and then looking back at the work I'd done over the years, because I've been in this space for a while, not just after I quit the 9 to 5. I was like, sure, we can teach the education, but not many people are doing the psychology piece, and kind of those who are afraid to make financial change for the better. I was also diagnosed with dyslexia, et cetera, so it's all kind of come together in kind of what I do now around finance, behavior, neurodiversity, and a focus on entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah. I wanted to talk to you about neurodiversity today. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to beat around the bush about it, because
let's go in.
I feel, and how neurodiversity, how it interacts. Well, firstly, what it is, because I don't even feel like I have a handle on the definition of the word. So what neurodiversity is, how it interacts with money. And if we could speak to the personal finance side, but also maybe the business side, and then your personal experiences as well, and maybe interventions and adaptations you've made in your life as well. I think that's a conversation that's going to help a lot of people, and will educate people who maybe don't know so much about neurodiversity, but maybe just broaden the horizons of people who do. So starting with this word, neurodiversity, what does it mean?
Yeah, good question. And I was so glad that you were breaking it down for me, because I was like, oh my God, am I going to remember all those questions? Neurodiversity. So, I mean, and there's a lot of words around this space that people get confused with. But when you think of neurodiversity, all it's basically is highlighting is the fact that all of our brains are different. So actually, neurodiversity encompasses us all, because our brains are wired and structured uniquely by default. So that word is almost... Sure, it's a useful word, but it doesn't actually say anything. When we're talking about things such as ADHD, dyslexia, autism, Tourette's, and so on, we're talking about a neurominority, where those people who have all those wonderful brains, they're slightly different, and there's a minority and amount of people whose brains operate that way, And we're talking about basically the way the brain functions neurologically, the way that neurons are connected in the brain is slightly different.
Because the brain is a physical structure, right? Like at the minutest level, it is just neurons interacting with each other and specific regions of the brain being responsible for different aspects of your movement and behavior and stuff. Okay, so we've got neuro minorities. Does that mean then that there's a majority that perhaps the world is catering to or optimized for?
Yes, and good point to mention as well. We talk about neurotypicals. So those are the rest of the brains who operate in similar ways. And, we could go on a tangent here, which I don't think is useful for this podcast, but the way things are structured around the world and set up is for the neurotypical mind. And that's where you have challenges for those who are neurominorities because the world hasn't been built with them in mind. And that's where it becomes a disability as opposed to your brain is structured how it is. It's absolutely beautiful, but because the world isn't catered for you, challenges arise.
Okay. So could we speak to, because I don't just want to focus on the financial challenges, I want to focus on like the opportunities and maybe some of the strengths as well. But what kind of challenges could a person experience in the day-to-day?
In the finance sense? Yeah. So it could be around planning financially. So, you get paid X amount of money, it's got to last how many days, 28, 30, whatever. And because of the way your brain functions, you struggle to make sure you have enough money to see you through the month. It could be goal setting. It could be impulse spending, which is obviously a common one when it comes to ADHD. And so many others. It's, it comes down to executive functioning. So this is for us to be able to do things throughout the day. And obviously to have good finances, which you know all about, if you are struggling with that functioning, which you need to have good finances, that's where it starts to get a bit problematic.
Yeah, could you tell us what executive function is as well? Because I've only just started to research it and it's been eye-opening, really, really eye-opening. And I think that has actually led to me thinking and behaving a bit differently, just even recently.
What, from reading about it?
Yeah, from reading about it.
Okay. I guess maybe that's the awareness, right? Because you're like, that's why. Yep, okay. So there we're talking about we need to be able to do certain things to function day to day. So back to what we was talking about with planning or preparing a meal or being on time. All of those require control, inhibition. The ability to inhibit and control yourself. Memory, for example. All those different factors come under executive control. When you are neurodiverse and your brain is functioning differently, that starts to impact your executive functioning. So that means being aware of time is a challenge. So for example, lots of ADHDers talk about time blindness. And I laugh because, and one of the things, so access to work is a great source of support. I don't know if you know much about it. No, I have to say. So it's basically a government-funded scheme that grants you money to help you do your work. So for example, really simple examples, might pay for an alarm clock because if you're an ADHDer and you have time blindness, you may get yourself locked into a task and be so hyper-focused on it. And I'm talking because I do this. All of a sudden, 5 hours have passed and you've forgotten about everything else you're supposed to do. I've got this amazing, those old school alarm clocks.
Sure.
And it's quite aggressive and it pulls me out of that little zone that I was in, for example.
And when you were talking about some of the challenges that you might face financially, so that thing of budgeting, essentially, like your money has to last you a certain number of days and then, or maybe you're more of an impulse spender. How does not budgeting as a result of your executive function, the way your brain works. How does that differ to just not being on top of your budget? Is it easy to tell?
It's a really good question, right? And I've got this, I don't know even how to well articulate this kind of niggling kind of annoyance I've had in my mind. So I was 35, when I was diagnosed with dyslexia. And I'm like, hold on a second. I've gone through my whole life, through university, college, et cetera, and nobody spotted the dyslexia. And if I had known, I would have got possibly so much more support as I did when I did my master's the other day. So your question kind of made me think of that, because there are so many people who may be neurodivergent and are not aware. Because depending on the type of neurodivergence you have, whether it is autism, ADHD, some do show up when they do brain scans and they have scientific proof of the differences in the brain, but some actually don't.
Right.
Some they actually can't see in the brain activity what is causing that difference. And so to your question, how do you know if you're struggling with budgeting because you're an ADHD or you're just struggling? It's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so difficult.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to your point about just the comment we spoke loosely about earlier about self-diagnosis and official diagnosis, or, it's difficult.
Yeah. I think it's a positive move that differences are being recognized and even celebrated between people. Something that I think of as analogous, and do correct me if you don't agree with this, is like your chronotype. So I'm a big follower of Matthew Walker, the guy who wrote Why We Sleep. And for ages, I struggled with like getting up early in the morning. I was just never one of those 6 a.m., 5 a.m. people, but I could always stay up late. I was always the most creative at nighttime.
Me too.
And yeah, and reading his book, it made me feel so much less guilty about my sleep cycle, because it's just like, well, everyone's different. And actually there are evolutionary advantages to everyone not being asleep at the same time before. Yeah. Like
when you say it like that, it's like, come on now.
Yeah. Before the dawn of like, modern civilization and stuff. So I'm glad that that's happening neurologically too. What sorts of opportunities might present themselves, superpowers, if you will, from the ways that different people's brains function when it comes to money?
This topic has so many clumsy words, right?
Yeah.
Executive function, neurodiverse, like you've got to use your whole list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could kind of take a step back and think about neurodivergence in general and think about the fact that we're different is absolutely beautiful. If you think about the development of products and services, different brains cause that, right? And, if I start with dyslexia, for example, me being dyslexic, kind of rewinding back to when I was working in, organizations, heading up finance teams, etc. From when I was studying, I noticed that the way I understood accounting concepts, so actually going through my SEMA studies, was so different to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I found a study buddy and we were, and I just was like, I don't know, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And then eventually it's like, oh, you're talking about this. And I'll explain it in my way.
Mm.
And same with when I went into the workplace.
Could you give an example?
Oh my gosh, no. Do you know what? I can't, and I'll maybe think of one and share it another time. But what I definitely noticed is that there'll be this moment between me and another accountant. And the only reason why I remember it is because at the time I felt really stupid because I don't get what they're saying.
Yeah.
And that company, I was qualified. Yeah. Especially even after I was qualified, I'll just feel really silly because I didn't understand the way they were talking to me about these concepts. But then after a little while of them maybe saying the odd word that made me think of this, I was like, oh, that. And all I noticed is that I processed things differently and I understood things differently. And I got through my schooling by finding my own way of understanding that concept. And I mentioned that, in answer to your question initially, because I think that's one thing that makes it beautiful. So being able to find different and unique ways of solving things. Mm. So, if we rewind maybe 10 years or whenever, when the way you did finance or the way we understood finance was one way, but actually as time's going by, there are so many ways you can do the same thing and still get the same great result. Yeah.
I ask because I think the way that I think about money is different, and I think that it's really helped me in my business and in my journey so far. I think I have been pretty good at taking timeless concepts that are in some cases hundreds or even thousands of years old, and combining them with either pop culture references or
you're good at
that have happened more recently. And it does having different ways of explaining things does help the light bulb to go off in certain people's heads. It lowers people's guard, because money is quite a scary and taboo subject for some people. So that's why I was asking, like, what was the way that you were thinking about something, and then the way that someone else was thinking about it? Because diversity in the way that we explain and convey information is very important as well.
Yeah, and just on that point as well, so I do lots of workshops for entrepreneurs and, you know, just general public. And I've had people come back to me and say, I've struggled with finance so much and I've hated it and I've avoided it. And they were like, from your talk, it just makes so much sense.
Ah, that's awesome.
Oh my gosh, literally, I should have recorded that call, but that's what you want. So, you know, slightly different to your question, but me being different in my thinking is obviously helping other people, whether they are neurodiverse or not, understand these concepts. And that was a business owner as well. So it's a different set of skills that you need to run a business and be financially viable in the long term. Yeah.
How does neurodiversity interact with business then?
The same as far as I'm concerned, even bigger. So we haven't mentioned rejection sensitivity. So that's what, you know, you're much more sensitive emotionally to things. One area that I've not heard anyone talk about is, as a new business owner or a business owner period, and you're maybe trying to go for funding, or you're trying to state your price for your product or service, if you're afraid about being rejected, that's going to have a direct impact on your business, right?
Yeah.
Especially, you know, depending on the type of business you have, whether you are client facing, whether it's, you know, whatever, it's going to kind of spill over in one way. And I remember talking about this, and this is where my memory draws a blank. So you've got pricing, obviously with the money management side, whether it's bookkeeping and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, if you're no good at it and you're really struggling, get support. You know, you can get that quite cheaply now. But to me, and this is why I do both, personal finance and business finance is almost exactly the same in terms of the skills required, the planning, the organizing, the memory, you know, and that's where I scream a lot about automation. But then obviously on things like the business side, you've got extra like the sales and pitching and the need for confidence in a different way than your kind of personal finances, which are at home, right? In your business, you're needing to be out there in some kind of way.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think about like examples of like how I think neurodiversity, I have no idea where I'm struggling saying it.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, neurodiversity can affect business. And I think about it the opposite way. I think about like what would make someone quit their job, you know, to just start something that's completely untested. Like, is it, so yes, you might have rejection sensitivity, but is there like a propensity to take more risks?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So in the starting the journey and the craziness that's required to do that, you know, there's lots of research and data that shows a high proportion of business owners and entrepreneurs are ADHDers. There's a massive correlation.
I think I've seen that in the financial content creation community. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, if you also think about the difficulties that those who are neurodiverse have in the workplace, for example, following a routine that's set by somebody else that doesn't allow for flexibility for how you work. One thing I love about being self-employed is I can do how and what as I please to meet those targets and deadlines, whatever they are, but how I do it is up to me. So that's usually a large part as to why people jump ship and go and do their own thing.
Also, I think as part of this is like almost like a willingness or a propensity to work with other people versus working by yourself. I always found that in jobs, I ended up working alone a lot. I don't know why, but I always end up in roles or doing tasks where it's like, okay, we're just going to give Timmy that thing, and he's just going to, and then we'll come back in like 4 hours. And
well, I'll put this to you. Is part of that, not trying to use psychology on you here, but is part of that to do with the want for routine, familiarity, sameness? And I say this speaking for myself slightly embarrassingly, but with people and new tasks and variation, it's a much more uncertainty and you can't control what's happening there. Whereas when you're doing things, you know what you're doing, you'll do amazing work and, you know, epic, but in your way.
Yeah.
in a way that you control and you know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I'm the same.
Yeah, we don't have to get into this because otherwise it will turn into a psychology session. But control is like a really big thing for me. And part of that comes from, I think, my personality. Part of that comes from experiences I've had as a child. But I really value control and routine. And I don't think I necessarily had that my whole life.
We're the same
basically.
person, Timmy.
Okay, cool. No, that's really
100%
good
routine. And I find, and happy to disclose, I have therapy and I will for the rest of my life.
Oh God, no. I think everyone should do therapy, and in particular, because I've done therapy too, and in particular when stuff is going well, that's when you want to do it. You don't want to break the glass in case of emergency type therapy necessarily.
But I just mentioned that because where I've had moments of struggle, as whether it's, as a result of being an entrepreneur or just life, whatever, a large part of it is when I slip out of my routine.
Right.
And then it's all a bit haywire. So yeah, routine, structure. And I'm saying all this stuff, but also I just want to add in here for the listeners, ADHD, autism, dyslexia looks different for everyone. So, the want for routine, and you've got some that have both ADHD and autism, and they're almost in some cases are really opposite.
Yeah.
So, on one hand you hate detail, on the other hand you love it, and it's an interesting kind of mix, right? So there isn't a one blanket for how it will show up in your finances. I remember because part of my dyslexia assessment, we did go over some of the ADHD stuff. So I'm not officially diagnosed as an ADHDer, going through that process, but it's looking very likely.
Mm-hmm.
And when we spoke to my mother about how I was a child, she was like, yeah, Krystle, you were a lot, darling.
Okay. Okay.
But one of the questions I commonly get from other ADHDers is, how are you good at finance? And if you're dyslexic, how do you understand numbers? And again, not wanting to go into a psychology session, but I think this is important to mention. Those labels don't say everything about how you are and how you'll be with your finances, because like you just mentioned with your upbringing, my upbringing, in terms of the strictness and the rigidness at home, and I had no choice but to do X, Y, Z, I think plays a large part in who I am today.
Yes.
So I have no choice but to get the money. There's no, or do well in school. I had no choice.
Yeah.
I had to. So I passed my financial maths degree because I had to. And lots of tears and panic attacks which is not good. But I think they all go into who the individual is and how that shows up in their personal and business finances. And it's good to understand that and then build systems and stuff to help you through.
One of the things I like about the content you do online is that you do share your own personal experiences, interventions you've made, strategies that you use to kind of navigate your life. Could you just share like some of the things that you do that help you to adapt and help you to be the best person you can be with your finances and with your business?
And it was coming. Yes, for sure. And thank you. It's so funny. You do this stuff and you don't know what people think of it. It's like, am I helping anyone? So thank you for sharing that.
I see you.
Thank you. In terms of things I do, first the alarm clock, like I said, I love it. It's very aggressive, but it does the job.
When you say aggressive, is that like the sound it makes, or? No,
it's just, I have it on a table, and because of the material, it literally just,
oh, okay.
So cool. It's aggressive in that it interrupts my life at that moment. Thinking about kind of productivity and planning and organization, whether it's business or personal, I love Notion, and I've started talking about it.
Okay.
Are you a Notioner?
I use Notion a little bit, and I think it's very powerful. Mm-hmm. And respect to people who use it, but it was way too much maintenance for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like you need a degree in Notion to use Notion. And yeah. But it's a great product.
That's where the hyperfocus came in. I've had a few nights where I just was on it, figuring it out.
Yeah.
You do need to go through that phase if you're really going to optimize. So for those who have the time and want to explore Notion, I find it really useful. And it's funny, I was talking to my mum about this the other day, and she was trying to understand kind of ADHD and the challenges. And I use it to plan my whole day. You can use formulas. I'm getting really needy, geeky here. I did stats and stuff, so I love that stuff. But yeah, you can do formulas that automatically calculate to show you to contact this person or to do that thing. And you can have it in a nice one kind of house. It's great for that. So that's going back to the automation stuff, right? So where I'm forgetful, or I get distracted because I'm hyper-focused on something that's really exciting, having that system there just ticking over in the background is amazing. Again, on automations, of course, with the finances, we know this, kind of paying ourselves, investing.
Yeah, standing orders, direct debits where possible.
I don't think about that stuff at all.
Yeah, you set it up once, maybe tweak it.
Exactly. And I think also, and I'm sure you speak about this all the time, but splitting your own money up into different places, right, is great, because then it's in the right place for you to spend from those places. Again, it all helps.
Yeah, and yeah, for listeners, a classic example of that is the 2 bank account strategy. So you get paid into one bank account, but then you also pay yourself into a secondary bank account, like a bill, and then you just spend from that second card. And so that's the card you're allowed to spend from, makes it way easier to not go over budget.
And kind of going over to what I do with people privately, especially those who are like me on the ADHD side, and emotion works really well. So when it comes to, a lot of people talk about impulse spending, right? And that being an issue. And when I work with people, what really helps is, one, the fact that I roll up my sleeves and really get into the nitty gritty with you, which is majorly uncomfortable for the most of the people that I start with. For the first, they get over it, but it's uncomfortable. I think I would hate it, to be honest.
I feel like that's the accountant in you, like wanting to go through every single line.
It might be.
Yeah.
But I mention that because once you've done that, you're then clear about where you are. The only way is up.
Yep.
And then in terms of controlling the impulse spending, what's required is for you to understand, what is it that you care about? What is it that is like a must do in your life, or what you're working towards, and getting really anchored in that. So really bring it to the forefront of your brain. So you're really excited and motivated. That helps counteract the random spending, because you're so invested in this thing.
Yeah. So knowing your why.
Yeah. And keeping it at the forefront, and like really breaking it down, and, and that I think really helps as well. I
find that when I'm in, because I impulse spend, and I think everyone impulse spends, or like the majority of people. And then the thing that distinguishes like one person from the next person is that, like, I will check my budget and be like, oh, that was quite impulsive of me. Whereas if you don't check it at all, it's just kind of happening and you're not recognizing it.
Yeah.
But I normally know that something is wrong when I'm impulse spending. So if I find that I'm spending a lot of money on something and I feel like I don't have control over it, that's time for me to really lean into the journaling, really like meditate. Keep an empty calendar. Keeping an empty calendar is so important. Like, I've been quite busy over the summer, and then last week I didn't have to do any events or anything like that. And ideas were just like flowing into my brain, and I just had the headspace to just think and stuff. But yeah, that's the time when you kind of go, okay, what's going on with me at the moment? And you can do stuff to help make yourself feel better, whether that's spending time with people that you love and care about, whether that's exercise, whether that's going out for walks in nature, or whatever the case may be.
Oh, you said so much there. Yes. But it's funny because 2 main things that I wanted to pick up on. The second one is gone, but hopefully it'll come back. The first one, which I'm conscious that I can get really quite deep in the psychology stuff, right? And I don't want to take this that way fully, but yes, when people are impulse spending, you need to understand why, because it's a bit like having a drink or having too much drugs, or drugs at all. I don't know, what am I saying? But it's because you're trying to deal with something underneath that you're not dealing with in the best way to overcome it. You're doing something to suppress it. And I used to impulse spend when I was working just around the back of Oxford Street. That was like my creative agency type. And I can't remember what was going on, but being in workplaces, it wasn't a great environment. And I think it was like payday or Friday or something, I'd go on Oxford Street and spend so much money. Like that was the routine. Yeah. Because I wasn't happy at work. So usually when you're impulse spending and you're trying to switch off your brain and just feel good immediately, it's because you're trying to deal with something with that quick fix. Yeah. So often it's good to, like you just said, try to step back and, okay, I need some self-care, some self-love, and to allow myself the space and time to work through that. And that's another conversation. It makes me think of that wonderful podcaster. You know, diving into that is hard and scary for many people.
I was going to say the exact same thing as that. Asking yourself the question, what sucks in my life right now? Like what's not working is really, really hard. When you have to get really honest with yourself about the stuff that's not working in your life, the stuff that sucks in your life. What's also hard about that is that when you answer that question, you realize that that is your life.
Oh, I felt that in my stomach.
That is the reality of your life. But there is a lot of freedom in, I think, being real with yourself about it, being honest and diagnosing it. Because as you said, with the like the spreadsheet, with going into the budget and you go into the details, the only way from there is up. I almost feel like it's going into the back of the fridge and you pull out the moldy tub of like rice or something and like you just know it's going to be like horrible and disgusting, but like it's out now and you can deal with it.
That's where I live for your metaphors and like, where do you get them from, my friend?
I don't know. I just think things are like other things.
Jeez, give me that part of your brain. I could be so black and white sometimes. It's like, Chris.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's give me some of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're spot on. And it's so scary and hard for a lot of people. I mean, I have people around me, whether it's family, friends, or sometimes clients or potential clients that actually where you are doesn't require me. I'd be a plaster.
Yeah. And I also think as well, it makes you realize that maybe something has to change. So when you were impulse spending on Oxford Street and it was because you're unhappy at work, having to face up to that might mean that you have to leave that job.
Oh, listen. It's
like, but the salary and like, I like, it's not completely bad. I like this person or I might have to move. Yeah.
It's hard conversations. And it's funny you saying that. I think 3 times this week I've had, what day is it? Yeah. 3 times in the last week. Yeah. I've had conversations with people. I think this is definitely a skill of mine. I'm very good at getting to the crux of the issue. Kind of, do we swear on this podcast?
If the spirit takes you there, yeah.
It's taking me, it's cutting the bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very good at that and just getting to the core. But I think this is where my rawness sometimes needs to be controlled. And not everybody is ready for that. And that's okay, each in their own time, right? The same way that some things that me and you and life have dealt with, we didn't deal with it 5-10 years ago. We've dealt with it at this point. So I say that for those who possibly are like, ouch, to this part of the conversation. That's okay. It's part of the journey. But also, once you start that journey, absolutely beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Because then like you just said, you're reminded like once you've done that ground zero, this is painful, this is uncomfortable.
You only have to do it once.
Yeah, then you're going forward.
You only have to experience the pain once, the discomfort once. And then once you do that, it's upwards. It's not going to be upwards in a straight line, but you will trend upwards and you'll get a lot of reward and momentum and motivation out of it as well.
Yeah. This makes me think of Simon Sinek. I think he spoke about, it's a hard one, but he spoke about when you're struggling and needing support. So with this process, this part of the process, whether it is you are in a lot of debt, some people that I come across are in eye-watering amounts of debt. And it's not necessarily the large amounts of debt. It's causing you to struggle every month, especially if you've got a child or whatever it is, and you just can't see your way out of it. And then that's causing you to ignore it. And that starts to pile up and get worse because now you're ignoring it, which is making the problem worse because you're ignoring it,
So what's your message to someone like that?
My first answer, which I almost feel is annoying, is find someone to talk to, but sometimes that's really difficult. And I guess maybe there we could recommend those kind of anonymous lines to have as an outlet.
Yeah. So like step change and citizens' advice. And
if it isn't a friend, or a family member, and then joining spaces and communities where maybe other people are talking about similar things, which is always quite nice. I think I shared a reel recently about, and just sharing that so many of the people that come to me have similar issues and everybody comes, and I'm sure you have the same, thinking that their situation is so different and so bad.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things where like, if everyone just shared,
Yeah.
you'd realize that you're not in the minority as well. Like we know the stats around how many people are in debt, or like how much people earn, or whatever. Like a lot of people are in a similar situation. You wouldn't even think it.
Yeah.
I'll give a concrete example to that. I started watching Ramit Sethi's I Will Teach You How to Get Rich.
Yes,
Netflix.
I think I've started watching it too. Yeah.
Because he's been on one this year. It's really impressive. He's been in the game for nearly 20 years now. And he is basically like a financial Mary Poppins to different families, right? And he's speaking to like a couple, and then he spoke to like a mum and her daughter. This mum in the first episode, I think she nets £25,000 a month. She has $5 in savings. Like she makes 25K a month, not year,
I heard you.
a month, and then spends 25K a month. So it's like you may see someone and they may have loads of stuff and a flashy car and this, that, and the other, but they may be struggling to pay their bills. You really, really don't know.
You really have no idea. And I think, I was talking to my mum, my brother about this today, but yeah, same. Like there's so many people that earn 6 figures, great amounts of money, but if your expenses are just as high, you're exactly the same as the person who earns 10 grand a year or whatever. So it's, and I share this often, it's not about how much you make. That's almost got nothing to do with it to some degree. It's about knowing what you're doing with that money, being mindful of it, being confident, and being able to identify, like you said, okay, I've overspent, okay, let me sort it out. And that is a different skill.
Yeah. There was something you said earlier that I wanted to touch upon as well, which is that what I have perceived as an explosion of awareness around neurodiversity in the last few years, I'd say, seems to be correlated with social media content around neurodiversity topics, which has made people more aware of it, and possibly in some cases to self-diagnose or go, oh, maybe I probably have this. Do you think that that's enough? Do you think it's enough to see a piece of content and go, and have that be the starting point for an investigation?
It's a good question. I mean, the way you framed your question, which is that a good starting point for someone to then go get diagnosed? Yeah, sure. Why not? Diagnosis hopefully will say yes or no and help you along your journey. It's funny. I'm generally very neutral on topics because I can understand both sides. With this, I think what people maybe forget about, if we're talking about neurominorities who have struggled in the workplace, maybe feel very different to their family members, are struggling with things such as their finances and can't see why their sister, mum or whatever is fine. Why can't I make as much money as them? Why can't I keep, whatever things that they're struggling with, obviously focus on the finance stuff. Then being in a community of people who are similar to you is powerful. So where people have started talking about it a bit more online, on social, which is the way the world is now, that's really an amazing thing, I think.
Okay.
Because a lot of those who are struggling with ADHD or autism or whatever it may be want to feel connected. And if they're in certain environments and they don't feel connected, then that's the answer. In terms of self-diagnosis, that then brings on to the conversation about the cost of diagnosis. So, and, there are some people who are like, this self-diagnosis is a bad thing. It's a problem. You should, okay. But then what? If some people, there are some people I've come across who are really struggling with their difference. Some people who've been diagnosed with dyslexia since they were 12 or whatever, and they really struggle with certain things. Fast forward to someone who hasn't had that diagnosis and is struggling with certain things in their life and are seeing information that's suggesting that this might be the reason, and there's things that I can, do to get help, like ADHD, there's medication for it. Then actually the increased awareness is amazing.
Yeah. Thanks very much for this conversation, Krystle. I always learn a lot when I speak to you. And yeah, neurodiversity was something I am aware of and I am looking into, but at the same time, didn't quite feel like I had like a concrete definition of, and certainly didn't have the breadth of knowledge around how it interacts with finance and business. So thank you very much.
It's okay.
We like to end our episodes by asking everyone a question. It's produced some pretty interesting responses so far. And it's, what's the best piece of money advice you've ever received? Who shared it with you and what did you learn?
Okay. Best. Oh, this is difficult. Funny, I'm a finance person, but I've never been asked this. Well done.
Yeah.
Best piece of money advice. Okay. I can't remember the full phrase because this is how I tell myself, I purposely don't log things in my memory if it's not useful. But it was basically really digging into me the importance of leverage.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And whether it's to save time, whether it's to get more money, whatever it may be, leverage. And that could lead into kind of how we use automations, right? Taking advantage of things to be able to do. And the person it was, I won't say the name, but they're a very impressive businessman. So obviously we could see the angle that he came from. But actually, I like it, especially as it can be applied to so many areas of your life. Yeah.
So what's an example of financial leverage then that people can directly apply?
I mean, on the kind of business angle, it could be borrowing money to invest in something that's going to bring about a positive return.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if we think about the dynamics between interest rates on, you know, interest you earn and interest you pay and understanding those differences, etc.
Yeah, debt very commonly described as a form of leverage when it comes to finance. But I also think, you know, I think of leverage as basically working smarter and not harder. So anything that you do once, which then changes the way that the financial system works or the way that you have to behave down the line, I think is a form of leverage. So setting up a standing order to save into a separate bank account every month is you leveraging technology to not have to make a decision every single month from that point on. So you do the work once and then it's automated from that point onwards. Same is the case with investments or paying off a credit card or whatever the case may be. So leverage, we've not had that before, but definitely very, very powerful. I can't remember who said this quote, but it was, give me a rock big enough and a hill high enough on which to stand and a lever long enough and I can move it. So basically you can move anything.
Oh, that's nice.
If you just have
I've got a mental picture, yeah.
Yeah, I did not phrase it that well.
But I got there. I can see it. I'm sure they can see it too.
But yeah, with enough leverage, you can move even the biggest, heaviest obstacles.
I like that.
For people who want to find you, Krystle, where can they find you?
They can type all the letters of my name into the internet. Krystle McGilvery Krystle _McGilvery on Instagram, on LinkedIn, all the places, Medium. My company, Mind Over Money, also is there.
We didn't even talk about that. Could you very, very, very quick plug of Mind Over Money?
Sure, thank you. Mind Over Money. My mum had the phrase mind over matter, which we've all heard of before. And I was like, that was really aggressive. That caused a lot of stress and anxiety. How about Mind Over Money, which is a focus on the psychological aspects of your financial decision-making. So I do things like the coaching. I work with organizations doing employee stuff. Ultimately, it's about working with you on that ground level stuff. And then, of course, building on the financial aspects, whether it's for founders, people who've got a small business, or just individuals who want to be better at their money.
Awesome, awesome stuff. Thank you so much for coming on, Krystle.
Okay.
It's been great to chat to you.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for watching this week's episode of the Mr MoneyJar Show. If you enjoyed it, then please do subscribe as it helps out the show a lot and enables us to continue running. Anyway, we'll be back next week with another special guest. I've been your host, Timmy Merriman Johnson.